Hey, Church at Nolensville students, my name's Mary, and we're so excited that you are joining us on YouTube Live tonight as we dig into God's Word. We're going to be starting a new sermon series tonight, and it's called Manifest, the Characters and Claims of Christ. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at how Christ has displayed himself to us and how we get to manifest that in our own lives and our day-to-day. And so we're super excited that you are here. Be sure to stay on. We're going to be doing a Zoom meeting, a Zoom small group meeting afterwards, and so we want you to be a part of that. If you don't have the link, feel free to reach out to me and Alex. We'll get that to you, or put a comment down in the comment section and we'll be sure to reach out and make sure that you have access to that. So let's prepare our hearts to hear from God's Word through Alex. And so we'll see you soon on Zoom.
Hey students, my name's Alex and I'm your pastor, and I've been spending some time on social media lately, and I know that you're probably used to a lot of pastors telling you get away from it, yada yada. It's where conversations are happening, so we have to address it. Here's the thing about social media and about a lot of what's going on right now, and why some of it is no different than the rest of human history. There are a lot of reasons to be anxious right now. There's a lot of reasons to worry. And all of us do it. All of us are anxious. All of us have something to worry about. But one of the interesting things about God and about the way that he has wired his relationship with us is that he cares far more about who we're becoming and where we're placing our hope when we're anxious than like what we're actually doing. And this is what I want to talk about tonight. Is I've been on social media, like I said, and I've been noticing this trend, and maybe you've seen it, maybe you've believed in it, but there's this whole idea of manifesting stuff to happen. And basically, if you haven't heard of it before, it's this idea that if I want some boy to like me, or if I want to get a good grade on this test, then I do these rituals. Like I just write, what I want down on a piece of paper a bunch of times, or, I say in a mirror a certain number of times or a certain way or whatever. And basically you're just putting out into the universe what you want. And it's called manifesting. Well, here's the thing about that. When we put our hope in the wrong place, we don't find what we're looking for. It's like trying to go to the wrong place to find treasure. You're not going to find it. And I don't know if you're like me, but I love a good treasure hunting story. I like Indiana Jones and the Goonies. What's one that's more recent? Lord forgive me, Outer Banks. But these treasure hunting shows, hunting treasure is all about going to the right place to find it, right? And so when we go to the wrong place for the source of hope, for to experience what we ultimately want out of life, or what is promised to us, or whatever, we're not going to find what we're looking for. And so this is what Jesus is talking about here in this passage. We're going to be in Luke 12 tonight, and he's going to tell us, hey, I know we all worry. I know we're anxious about something, but there are ways that you're going to try to find hope in that worry, in that anxiety, but I've got the right place to find that hope, the right, the foundation that can sustain the weight of your worry. Okay, so let's jump into Luke 12. We're going to be in verses 22 to 34. It's a little bit of a long passage, so bear with me. But trust me, it's worth it. Okay, so he's talking to his disciples, his followers, and he says this: I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you'll eat, or the body and what you're going to wear. Can you imagine going a day without worrying about that kind of stuff? He's asking you to not worry about it for the rest of your life. He says, for life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They don't sow or reap, and they don't have a storeroom or a barn, yet God feeds them. Aren't you worth much more than the birds? Can any of you add a cubit to his height by worrying? If then you're not able to do even a little thing, why worry about the rest? Consider how the wildflower grows. They don't labor or spin thread, yet I tell you, even Solomon, a great king, in all his splendor was adorned like one of these. If that's how God clothes the grass, which is in the field today and thrown into a furnace tomorrow, how much more will he do for you, you of little faith? Don't keep striving for what you should eat or what you should drink, and don't be anxious. For the Gentile world eagerly seeks all these things, and your Father knows you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be provided for you. These things that you're tempted to worry about, and the world calls us to be worried about. He says, seek his kingdom, and they'll be provided. Don't be afraid, little flock, because your Father delights to give you the kingdom. He'll take it a step further, and he'll say, go ahead, sell your possessions, give to the poor, make money bags for yourselves that won't grow old, an inexhaustible treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, your heart will be also. All right, so we're talking about treasure hunting. We're talking about this idea that we can find hope, that we can find opportunity, we can find pleasure and happiness if we just look in the right place. So, where are the places that you are tempted to run where you're not going to find eternal treasure, treasure that can't be taken from you? Because that's the thing about almost all of those treasure hunting movies that I talked to you about just a second ago. In like almost every situation, maybe in every movie, the treasure gets threatened to be taken away as soon as it's found. And in the same way, when you find something that you think is a treasure worthwhile of holding on to, life is going to throw you a curveball. Life will attempt to take it away. Because our lives, this world that we live in, is riddled with sin and evil and opportunity to take our faith away from where it's supposed to be in eternal treasure. Eternal treasure just means that it's not going anywhere. It's not going to change. And so how is it that we can make a claim about our lives or about what is worthwhile? What is it that we can actually manifest that's not going to go anywhere? The only place to find that is in the claims of Christ, in the character of Christ, and him saying, this is who I am. But what happens when we don't do that? We have to address the problem before we can get to the solution. Where are the places that you and I are tempted to run to find treasure that isn't sustainable? Well, the first, I think, is praise. I think you and I are always tempted, maybe you're like me, to seek the praise of other people, to seek fame, to seek approval, to the point where you're willing to perform, either in the quality of your work or the amount of work that you're getting done, or maybe it's to carry yourself in a certain way for certain people to find you funny or attractive. Ultimately, it's going to lead you to acting, to being something you're not, until you feel like you're an imposter in your own skin. Maybe you meet me there right now, or maybe you can remember a time where you felt, I don't belong here. That happens to professionals, that happens to people in friend groups and families. What's another place that people run to find hope? I think it's pleasure. I think people, especially if you start running out of sources, places to look, you just kind of want to distract yourself. You kind of just want to make it another day, another week. And so you'll seek out pleasure, either in experiences or in things, just having fun. If we're laughing and carrying on, it's kind of hard to be concerned with the bad stuff. But anyone who's experienced a good time knows that doesn't last. The last place I think we look to find hope is in protection, fortune, possessions, things that we can surround ourselves with that either give us joy or help us seek approval, or maybe it just makes it seem like it's a much further fall to hit the bottom. If I have a nice house or a nice car or enough money in my bank account, then even if I slip, if I fall, then it won't end things, right? It won't hit rock bottom as a result. So the world, as Jesus promises here, is going to eagerly seek those three things. It's going to promise you that there is hope in these things, that there is provision in these things, that there is treasure in them hills, right? But if you go looking in the wrong place, you're going to come up empty, or you're going to find something that can be taken away from you. So it's not ultimately good news. It sounds good. It's kind of like the hired man that we talked about last week. It sounds good, it looks good, it seems like it's there for you, but ultimately it's not good, right? Because it's not eternal, it's temporary. It's money bags that a thief can come and take or a moth can destroy. So, what about good news that is eternal, that can't be taken away, that is a character and claim of Christ that we can manifest in our lives because it is true and it is always true? There's also three things we can learn from this passage that answer that question. I think the first is the gospel of creation. It's good news that God created all things, that we're not just some accident. Because if he created all things, it means that he cares about the details of what he creates. He wants to provide for it. And he promises that with the birds and the wildflower passage, right? Have you ever been around a raven or a crow? They're like nasty rats with wings. They eat trash, they make a lot of ugly, awful noises that wake you up in the morning, and they've got this like, have you ever actually looked at one? Like there's like a sheen of just greasy grossness on its wings. Ugh. God says he provides for that thing. What about when he calls people, humanity, the crown jewel of his entire creation? He challenges you, don't you think I care about you more than that ugly rat with wings? What about wildflowers? You know, a lot of us are worried about what we look like, the image that we present, the security and youthfulness that we put out there. Look at influencers and our attempts to influence others. Don't we want to look successful and look like we got it all together? Well, you know what's funny? In a field, just doing what it was created to do, to be a wildflower, to just adorn a grassy field with flowers and stuff, they are beautiful. But just like you and me, anybody can find a reason that they don't want you there, or that they don't like what you have to offer. People cannot promise you security of hope and acceptance, because any beautiful flower in the wrong place is called a weed. And if you've ever tried to maintain a lawn, what Jesus calls beautiful here in a wild field is a burden if you don't want it in that patch of grass. And so, do you find that acceptance? Do you find that approval? Do you find that worth in what people think of you? And at the wrong place, at the wrong time, at the wrong look, you're considered possibly a weed? Or are you going to find beauty and acceptance and worth in what God says you are? That, man, if you are where I put you, if you are doing what I've called you to do, if you just understand that I have created you to be beautiful in this place, then you have your worth. It's a different perspective there, isn't it? All right, what about the second gospel, the second good news, the second character and claim of Christ that we can celebrate is the gospel of family. Starting in verse 29, 30, God says, look, I am your good father. Now, if you're like you and me and you forget that the Lord loves you, that the Lord provides for you, then you ultimately believe in loneliness. You ultimately believe that maybe you were created, that maybe God has these claims, but they're for other people, or that they're for kind of all of us, and you're just kind of like lost in the shuffle. Like, hey, don't forget about me. I get that way sometimes. And ultimately, I'm forgetting that I'm not lonely, that I'm not just a number, but that God is uniquely and individually cares about me as my good father. That like a good father, when I mess up, there's grace and there's extended arms ready to hug. That when I need something, there is provision, there's a roof over my head, there's food on my table. Now, all of us are going to experience moments in our lives where I think, I need that and I'm not getting it. I promise you, one of the things you can claim and know about the character of God is that if you do need it, He is providing it. He might just be providing that thing that you need at a different time, or He actually knows that that's just a want that you have, and that in order to know Him better, to have the relationship with Him that you actually need, He needs to withhold that thing from you, or he needs to give it to you as a blessing at a later time. So another implication that I want to make sure that you hear me talk about. So snap back into it, get your notes out. I want you to hear this. Everyone who has been hurt, everyone who is anxious, and everyone who is ever worried has an endless ability to come up with bad reasons that God might reject or forget them. I'm here to tell you that all of those are lies. When you come up with a different sin, a different story, just whatever reason you can come up with that God doesn't actually love me, or God doesn't, approve of me, or whatever, you can always go to God, no matter how broken. In fact, the more broken you come to him, the more joyful he is to get to redeem and restore that. That is a good father. If you've experienced anything else from that, from an earthly father, I'm here to tell you that that is not a representation of God the Father. But give some grace to your earthly fathers as well. All right, the last gospel, the last piece of good news that we can get from this passage is the gospel of kingdom, that God is not just a creator of things, not just a provider over his creation, but that he is also a ruler. He is a king sitting on the throne of his kingdom, of his creation. And no matter how bad sin seems to get, no matter how out of control things seem to spin, he is still sovereign, that he is still the ruler and has power over all things. That the evil, the bad things in this life, the sin, the way it affects our lives is, of course, a part of the temporary life that we find ourselves in. They are not the original intention for the way that God created things, but it is fully his intention to provide amidst those things, in spite of sin, but also to restore all of it. And so when we look at our lives and we say, man, there's all this brokenness, there's all this sin, there's all these ways that the Lord hasn't provided, or there's still all this pain that's not dealt with, or this backstory that means that I can't come to him. His intention is to restore all those things through your story, either here in the temporary or eternally in heaven, in his presence. And so when we reject that reality, that claim of God in the Bible, when we reject that and we say, we're actually saying, I actually know the plan for my life better than you, God. My plan to restore my life or to make my life better is better than your plan. But here's why we're ignorant when we do that. We reject the fact that because God is creator, because he is king, because he is sustainer and provider, because he is outside of time, he is eternal. He actually has the full perspective of all of history at his fingertips as he plans out your life. You don't have that perspective. He also creates all things, sustains all things, plans all things, and has the power to make that happen. You don't. And so when you take on the responsibility, the pressure of planning out your steps and manifesting your plan for your life into reality, you are taking on a burden. You are being pushed down by a pressure that your power, your perspective cannot sustain. And so we have to acknowledge that God is the king sitting on the throne of our lives. That no matter how scary it can be, how anxious it can feel to give up control, ultimately you can have more trust in that than in yourself or in some system that man created to promise you some hope, some life, some treasure that isn't yours, that isn't possible outside of the claims of Christ. And if there's one claim that takes us from those first three false hopes, of praise, of pleasure, and of protection, and shifts us towards a hope, a gospel, a good news of creation, of fatherhood, and of kingdom. It's the claim, the character of Christ, that he is faithful, that he is always here for us. Because I think that is the one message that if I had to say, this is the one thing that we can believe about God because of the whole Bible, it's that he is faithful. That he is faithful in what he says about his creation, he is faithful as a father, and he is faithful as a king to restore all things and to lead us into a hope that we can set our eyes on. And so we always want to ask two questions, right? We always want to ask, what is this claim? What is the character of Christ that I need to know right now? And what am I supposed to do with that? And so ask yourself, what is it that I run to? Where do I put my hope that is not eternal, that is temporary? Is it praise? Is it pleasure? Or is it protection? Do I try to perform? Do I try to distract myself? Do I try to hustle into prosperity? Or do I claim Christ? And how do I claim Christ's faithfulness in that? Is it that he created and loves me? Is it that he provides for me and accepts me as a father? Is it that he is a king who has a good plan and the power to make it happen? And then what am I going to do about it? How am I going to live differently this week? How am I going to lead others to live differently? How am I going to go someplace, trust in God in such a way that I can call others to follow behind me and do the same? I love you guys. Go in grace and peace to love and serve the Lord. Also, don't forget, we are going to be meeting on Zoom so that you can jump onto our 30-minute Zoom discussion about this topic. So, once again, go in grace and peace to love and serve the Lord.